Phone on silent.
Okay, I'm here.
I do.
Tree warden business.
Darren's response is much appreciated. Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. Welcome to the Town of Essex Select Board meeting for Monday, January 27th. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda?
No.
Scott, is the sound level a little loud? Is this a little too loud for the mics, or are you all, this is good? Okay, thank you. Oh, okay, good to know. Okay, I'll move it closer. So this being that there are no changes to the agenda, we don't need to approve the agenda. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to start off with a public hearing on a petition, and then we'll move into regular business of the Select Board. There's agendas at the back table. If you haven't signed in already, please do so, especially if you're planning to speak this evening. So I'm going to open the public hearing. I'm going to give you a little bit of housekeeping information about how the evening's going to go, and then we'll move into the public portion of the meeting. So I will open the public hearing to consider proposed amendments to the Town of Essex Charter to expand the Select Board from 5 at-large members to 6 members, 3 of whom would be elected from inside the village, and 3 of whom would be elected from outside the village. And the text of the proposed charter changes is on the screen behind me as well. So here's how tonight's hearing is going to work. This is the first of 2 required public hearings. The purpose of this hearing is to ask questions and express opinions about the proposed charter changes. We are not here tonight to decide whether to put the changes on the ballot. They are going on the ballot because the petition submitted met the required legal criteria. We will not be voting on anything tonight regarding these proposed charter changes. This is just a hearing. We will read aloud the proposed charter changes and show them up on the screen. And I will share with you some concerns about the proposed charter changes that have been brought to the Select Board's attention. I will ask for a show of hands for who wants to speak, and based on that, we will determine how much time each speaker has. And then I will open the floor to the public. So at this point, I'm going to ask Pat Murray, the Select Board Clerk, to read aloud the proposed charter change language.
So the petition language is as follows. We, the undersigned legal voters of the Town of Essex, hereby petition the Select Board of the Town of Essex, Vermont, to place the following article on the warning for the annual town meeting to be held on the 3rd day of March 2020. We certify that we are presently voters of that town. The article to be placed on the warning to read, Article, shall the Town of Essex amend the town charter to expand the Select Board from 5 at-large members to 6 members, 3 of whom would be elected from inside the village and 3 of whom would be elected from outside the village. If approved, the charter language would change as follows in boldface, which I will mark just as I get to it. Chapter 2, Officers, Section 202, Number, Terms of Office, Election. A. There shall be a Board of Selectmen consisting of, and change here, 6 members. And D. All selectmen shall be elected, and change here, as follows: 3 from inside the village of Essex Junction, 3 from outside the village.
Thank you, Pat. The Select Board takes citizen petitions very, very seriously. And upon receiving this petition, we acted immediately to begin the process of getting it on the ballot and researching what was requested and how it would be implemented. This is not the merger plan vote. I would like to be very clear, this is a separate vote, independent of the merger plan that's being drafted right now. This vote will happen on March 3rd. The merger plan vote will happen on November 3rd. So let's make sure that we're clear on that. The Select Board has not taken a formal position on this charter change. It's my hope that we will do so after we have heard from the residents during the 2 public hearings. However, a number of concerns about the proposed charter changes have arisen among Select Board members as well as staff members and residents. I will share these concerns with you and then we'll open the floor for public comment. The concerns fall into 5 categories. Concerns as to under and over representation. Concerns as to an even-numbered board. Concerns as to the creation of districts and the formation of a new board. Concern as to the legislature's approval, and concerns as to fully informing the public. The concerns as to under and over representation. It is unclear whether the proposal intends that only village voters would elect the village representatives and only town outside the village voters would elect the town outside the village representatives. Some residents have asked whether the proposal is to allow all voters to elect all 6 representatives. This lack of clarity may confuse voters at the polls. There is concern about loss of representation. Currently, all town residents, regardless of where they live, are represented by 5 people. The proposal for a new board is for 3 representatives from the village and 3 from the town outside the village. Assuming that only village voters would elect the village representatives and only town outside the village voters would elect the town outside the village representatives, then that means all town voters would lose 2 representatives. Conversely, if this proposal were to be implemented, and if the proposed merger vote in November were to fail, then when the village trustees and select board meet jointly, there would always be only 3 town outside the village representatives and 8 village representatives making decisions for the entire town. Town outside the village residents who had hoped to be equally represented would be statutorily underrepresented. Concerns as to an even-numbered board. Vermont statute requires a minimum of 3 select board members and allows up to 2 more. Additional members can be added via charter change. We've checked with the Secretary of State's office and the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and we've done research, but we cannot find a Vermont municipality with an even-numbered board. And so therefore, there is no municipal precedent for us to follow. Some residents have pointed out that the Essex Westford School District Board has an even number of members. However, the Westford representatives each have only half a vote. So even when the full board of 10 members votes, there are only 9 votes counted. There does not appear to be a precedent in Vermont law or in Robert's Rules of Order, which is the internationally accepted rule set for parliamentary procedure, to account for an even-numbered board or for what process to follow in the event of a tie. A potential solution is that if a motion cannot be decided because of a tie, then the motion would die. This process would mean, if factions developed among board members, that no decisions could be made and the community's best interests would not be served. There is legitimate concern that an even-numbered board would politicize most select board decisions. It is presumed that the intention behind an even-numbered board is to encourage board members to work together to avoid a tie. However, it can also be presumed that an even-numbered board divided by geography can foster deeper division and allow for factions more easily to be formed. Concerns as to the creation of districts and the formation of a new board. The proposal calls for representatives from the town outside the village and the village. The village is a statutorily established district. The town of Essex as a whole is a statutorily established district and includes the village within it. However, the area of the town we refer to as the town outside the village is not a statutorily established district, nor does the petition charter change lay out any information for how this district is to be established. It is uncertain whether it is legal to elect representatives from informally designated areas. The petition proposal does not lay out any mechanism for converting the current board to the proposed board, nor does it lay out a timeline. Presumably, therefore, it would be allowable under this proposal for the current select board to maintain its current makeup and decide to implement the change at some future undetermined date. Concerns as to the legislature's approval. Vermont is a Dillon's Rule state, meaning that towns must have all their charter changes approved by the legislature. It is uncertain that the legislature would approve this proposal because there are so many unanswered questions and because what is proposed has no precedent. There is concern that the legislature would not approve a governance plan that elects representatives from a non-statutorily established area. There is a concern that the legislature would not approve a governance plan that reduces voter representation. There is concern that the legislature would not approve a governance plan that does not include implementation steps or a timeline for implementation. Concerns as to fully informing the public. This is not the first time the Select Board has received a petition signed by residents asking for changes that are potentially not legally possible. However, this is the first time we have received such a petition that met the statutory threshold for placing an article on the town meeting ballot. There is concern that voters who signed this petition were not fully informed of the intricacies of what has been proposed, the difficulty of its implementation, or the unpredictability of whether the legislature would approve the changes. Should the article pass but the legislature reject the proposed charter changes due to difficulties that were not disclosed at the time the voters signed the petition, those who signed it will not only not get what they want, they could determine that they were misinformed about the petition's potential success. These are all concerns that have come to our board from all different corners of the town and village and from among the staff and the Select Board. And I felt in the spirit of true disclosure, we should share those proposal charter changes, the concerns about the proposed charter changes, as well as listen to the public. So the public hearings will happen today and next Monday at 7 o'clock in the same room. And after that, the board will have a conversation about the proposal to determine whether we support or not take a position on the petition. So now I'll open the floor to comments from the public, and just a couple of things to remember. Please keep your comments respectful and brief. Do not interrupt or have side conversations while others are speaking. Please direct all comments and questions to me as the Select Board Chair. Over the course of the meeting, various Select Board members or staff members may be asked to answer questions. Speakers will be given a limited time for their comments, and we'll do a show of hands in a moment to determine that length of time. We will be very strict about the timing, so we will cut you off if you go over your time. Please be respectful of others' time. If someone ahead of you makes the point you wanted to make, please just say, "I agree with that person," rather than repeat the point. Remember to state your name clearly when you get to the mic, and everyone will have a chance to speak once. There's a lot of people here tonight, so we're going to give everybody a chance to speak once. Thank you for listening. And if you are thinking about speaking this evening, would you please raise your hand? Keep it up, please. Okay. Pardon me?
That's good.
Give everyone 2.5 minutes each. So I know that's not a long time, and it's frustrating to have to squeeze your thoughts into such a short period of time. You are also welcome to email us, call us, speak to us when you see us in person with your comments. We would really appreciate that. So if you would like to speak, Evan?
Just for the record, the timing, you need to state your name and address. That is not part of your 2.5 minutes. I start after that, so say it slowly for the record, please.
Oh. Yeah, I think we're going to have to. Okay, so if you are wishing to speak, please come to the mic.
Clarification, please.
I have a concern. What's your address on the notes? Can I not just go right ahead?
I have a concern about residents sharing their actual address on the news. I would personally feel more comfortable if you simply stated whether you lived in the town outside the village or within the village. I don't know if that's all right. Yeah?
I think
that just feels better to me.
Yeah.
It feels more appropriate.
That's,
Thank you.
Does the board agree to that change in procedure? That's fine. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Bob, you had a clarification.
Please. I may stand corrected. It's my understanding that a board representing a community, be it a select board or city council or whatever it may be, cannot take a position as a board on a particular issue to be voted on the village individual members may do that. So I don't know if the questions you were raising earlier reflect a board position or your own concerns or the entire board's. I'd like some clarification on my questions.
As I stated, the concerns are a group of concerns that we have heard from board members, staff members, and residents. They are not individual to any person. They're aggregated together to share out. And we have not taken a position. The concerns I stated are not a position of the board. We have not discussed it publicly yet. It would be inappropriate for us to take a position without having a hearing first, at least one hearing first. So we plan to discuss it at a future meeting after the hearings have occurred.
And regarding the board taking a position on an article to be voted upon, I mean, Colchester was in hot water a few years ago because of that. So I just would caution you.
I appreciate the caution, and we'll double check with what our authority is on that, but we definitely do intend to discuss the petition as a board. Thank you. Paula, thanks for your patience.
Not a problem. I have two things. One is.
Full name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paula Duke, Town Outside the Village. I have two things, actually. One is that I would be more supportive of the 3 and 3 with 1 at large. And the other thing is, I think it would be very helpful with the concerns that you just read for us to be able to read them also. And if there are some of us who might want to work on some of those issues and work on resolving some of those issues, it would be helpful for us to have the list. So I would implore you to produce that list and make it available to residents. Thank you.
We'll be happy to do that. Thank you, Paula.
Betsy Dunn, Town Outside the Village. I would agree with the statement that this woman just gave, that Paula gave. I would also like to have the names of the person that gave that. You're getting our names. I'd like to know the names of the people who told you that. Thank you.
I'll do my best. I can't guarantee that I'll have that.
Robert Bates, Town Outside the Village. As I've been thinking about this proposal, I was pleased that, I think it was finally yesterday on Front Porch Forum, I think it was you, Max, that posted the latest update on the board's proposal. And I don't need to get into this in detail, except that I think we need to see them side by side. That's part of my decision making. And I tried to put myself in the place of a legislator who might eventually be voting on this charter change if it were approved. And I looked at the current proposal from the joint boards, which I believe is 2, 2, and 3. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. 2 from the village, 2 from town outside the village, and 3 at large. The way it's worded, and maybe you intend to clean this up, but if I was sitting there as a legislator from Brattleboro, I didn't know Essex very well, this is very mishmashy and confusing. The model would remain in place for 5 to 7 years. I'm quoting here. During that time, the new board could develop a different permanent model for representation. If the new board chooses not to develop a new permanent model, then the transitional model would end and representation would revert to an at-large system. In other words, all 7 members, I guess, would be elected at large, which is what we have currently, except 2 more, that had been in place in town prior to the merger. If I'm a legislator reading this, I would say, excuse my language, what the hell do you people want? I mean, be clear here. Do you want this model that you're asking us to approve? Or you're leaving the door open to change your minds? I mean, you can come back for another charter change, but it's really wishy-washy. I just think, okay, so
Bob,
I'm
do
going
you
to
have a comment germane to the petition?
I'm getting to that. Thank you.
Your time is up. Can you take 10 seconds to summarize what you're going to say?
Okay, all right. Well, the elephant in the room is this representation issue, and I think 3 and 3 equalizes it. And, you know, this whole town village thing, let's put it to bed once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Mike Plagman, Beach Street, Essex Junction. First of all, I'd like to thank Max Levy for 12 years of great service on that board. Thank you very much, Max. So I had the privilege of serving on that board for 6 years. I thought about it for the last couple of days. I can't ever remember being a village representation on the town select board being in the majority. I believe it was always 3-2 or very close. There might have been 1 year when I was by myself, but I never remembered that being an issue as far as handling the town's business. It was a collaborative effort. It was a civil discussion. There were disagreements. We got to a common place, and then we voted. I don't remember this being nearly the tempest in a teapot that it's become now. I agree with Paula. I think my preference would be to see the boards be 3-3 and 1 at large. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Keely Shell
Hi,
from the
Keely.
village, and this is Etta, but she has nothing to say, hopefully. Thank you all for your service. I know one of the exciting things about a community like this in Vermont is how many opportunities there are to be involved. We have the select board, the trustees, the school board, which I'm serving on, and many other things, 2 planning commissions, 2 zoning boards, 2 sets of library trustees, tons of things. And with that in mind, I'm very concerned about anything that adds more total representatives that we need to find people to serve for in this community. My experience getting elected to the school board was that I was one person standing for 2 one-year seats on this new board. So I was elected. Nobody had a choice in whether I was elected once I got 30 people to sign my petition. And then the board appointed someone for the other seat. So when we have more people running than there are seats, we have more democracy. We have the same number of people as seats. We have a really weak democracy that's like a vote of approval. And we have no one running, then the board gets to decide who serves with them, which is completely undemocratic, basically. I mean, I'm sure that everything that you do is in good intention, and when there's times that people have to appoint someone, so be it. But I would rather have more people running. So my request to everyone in this community is think carefully, and before you add more seats, think, am I personally going to put my name in the hat for one of these public service opportunities in this community? Otherwise, maybe we should be thinking about 2 and 1 at large, or setting up 5 new shaped districts in our community, like someone suggested on the Front Porch Forum or the Essex VT Facebook, because I have a lot more in common with the Essex Town people 50 yards from my home than maybe some Junction people 2 miles away from me. So there's a lot of ways to think about it, but please let's not add more seats that we need to find people for, especially when we're halving the number of people that can run for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce.
I'm Bruce Post. I live not far from the Essex Town Fire Department, so you can guess where that is. I signed the petition, although I was part of what we call the Budget to Ballot Group, the Essex Governance Group, people from the village and from the town who weren't in the village, came up with solutions. We morphed into the Essex Governance Group. One of the big priorities we had was a multi-district community based on neighborhoods. And we got this. This was 4 or 5 years ago. Now we see proposals that seem to be slanted in a way. I'm looking at the interim board that you're considering, if the merger goes into effect, would have the trustees would support 3, and the select board would appoint 3. It's very possible that everybody could be from the village. You know, so there's a feeling here that even when a group of good people come together, they're not listened to. We get, I hear ya, they're not listened to. And I think the tithe thing has some problems, but again, you take an oath of office to represent the whole community, so maybe there shouldn't be any ties. But I think this is a symptom of a larger problem. I would hope you would take it to heart. Many citizens contributed something we thought was better for this whole community, and we get the cold shoulder 4 or 5 years later. Thanks.
Thank you, Bruce. Next, Harlan?
Hi, Harlan Smith, village resident. You only gave me 2.5 minutes, so I'll keep this as short as I can. My concern, I'm not opposed to 3-3. I just feel like it was rushed in, and I think it's incomplete. I don't like the idea of a tie vote and not knowing what the result of that is ahead of time. I want to know what the end result is. And I don't want it to be no, because the ones that are going to come into a tie vote are issues just like this. Where it's contested, you're going to get into a tie vote, and then it's going to get dropped and it's going to go away. And then all of us who have very busy lives are going to have to relight that fire again and get it going again. If it was required that it had 20 minutes, and if you couldn't come to an agreement that it got tabled and it had to be on the agenda at the next meeting, I might feel a little more warm and fuzzy about that. But I don't want issues to be dropped because we can't come to a consensus at 6 and 6. And then the other part of this proposal that I do not like is that it keeps the line drawn between the village and the town. And I think we're all tired of it. I think that argument is just killing us all, and we're all exhausted from it. I would rather, if you decided that 2 districts were great, I'm all for it. Draw another line. Stop this village and the town outside the village piece. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Sir?
Mike Sullivan, village, I guess. But I'm in the town, too.
Yes, you are.
So that's the issue here. So the part of the problem is this idea brings a separation, brings a permanent separation to the 2 areas. And if you either want to merge them, that's great. Elected at large or 3-3 with an alternate or whatever. But this proposal just divides everything on a very permanent position. And in my opinion, if the merger failed, I would be looking for separation from the town, which would make the town's taxes go up as well. So it's it's a no-win situation for a lot of us, and I'm very opposed to it.
Thank you. Sir?
My name's Ethan Lawrence. I live on Osgood Hill Road.
Nice to meet you, Ethan.
Nice to meet you all. I'm new to the community. I've only lived here for just over a year. Long story short, I grew up in Milton. My parents lived on Strawberry Lane, 95. There wasn't 3 houses on our road. Time changed. I'm 22 years old. There's developments all around us. Great. I grew up on a farm down the road with some cousins. So me and my wife had our son. Wasn't ideal. We were living with my parents. Came to Essex. Looked around. Chittenden County was hard to find a place. So we found a place up on Osgood Hill. There was land. We could, you know, continue to farm, have the things that we wanted to have. I think my biggest concern as a resident is misrepresentation. And I haven't been a part of this very long, so I don't know everything that goes on. But I feel that, you know, my own situation, I live up on a dirt road, you know, I got my own water, my own sewer. I've never been in the library. I know it's great. I donated to the ambulance $50. That way they come pick me up and it wouldn't cost me $1,200. It's a great cause, everybody should do it. I guess the biggest thing that I would say is, as watching Milton change, you know, there's a dense part of Essex that has many residents, many things, you know, great amenities, natural gas, sewer, you know, sidewalks, all those great things. That's great, you know. When I bought my house, I wanted a dirt road. I didn't want to see my neighbors.
1 minute left.
Thank you. So I think the only thing I would say here, and I'm not for division, I'm not so sure about this. I like the 3-3 with 1 at large, and I like expanding, whether we had to expand the boundary if we came to a decision to divide. But I think that there is 2 sides of Essex, and there's a dense area, and there's still some 24-year-olds out there growing cattle in their front yard and harvesting livestock and wildlife. So I think that's my biggest fear, is the reason I came to Essex and where I am in Essex. I don't want to lose those rights that I came here for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Next. George.
It's George Tyler from Essex Junction, and I'm on the Board of Trustees, and we've all been, I've been working with Andy and Max for a transitional charter for merging the 2 communities, and we've been doing that for several years, and I don't want to comment on the charter, on the proposal. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to say anything, but I do want to comment on one thing that Elaine mentioned. Early on, we hired a legal counsel to advise us about what would fly in the legislature and what would not fly. And our legal counsel told us that the legislature has never approved, as far as we knew, an even number of people on a municipal board. If we wanted to put that into a charter, a new municipal charter, we would be sending the legislature something that they have historically not done. So I do want to reiterate, and I'm not sure where you got your information from, Elaine, but that's the information that we had. So that's why we are recommending have a transitional proposal of 2 from the village, 2 from the town, and 3 at large in order to balance that off. But we wanted to, all along, make sure that we presented the legislature with an odd number of people on any board that we were proposing. I can't stress it enough. I think Apple Corporation and Facebook are private corporations. They're not municipal corporations. So I think it's a huge difference. Thanks.
Thank you. Sam.
Uh-oh, I think I'm starting to forget what I'm going to say. I'm Sarah Michelle Stoltz. Okay, now I remember. And I live in the town. This proposal is not equal representation. This does not represent the entire community's perspective. I want to say that I appreciate, Bruce, what you were, I appreciate Mr. Post's comments early on. It really helped me understand what I think people are looking for. And I think that can happen. But I don't think it can happen until we have equal taxation. So I feel very strongly that we can have equal representation once we have a merged community with equal taxation. And then I believe that we sort of have 3 different kind of districts or neighborhoods in our entire town. I think we have the people who live densely near the train tracks where I live. I think there are people just outside of that, which would be considered outside the village, that are also suburban and densely populated. And then I think we have the rural areas of Essex, and all those needs need to be taken into account. So I would just hope that would be some food for thought. for everybody, and I'd like us all to pay the same tax so that we can be equally represented. Thanks.
Thank you. Andrew?
Good evening, Andrew Brown, live in the village, which is also in the town. A couple of concerns, one being the handout that was by the sign-in sheet. My understanding is that was not provided by the municipality, but provided instead by the people who came up with the petition.
We did not provide any handouts tonight.
Okay, so I guess we should all just be aware of that when we look at that piece of information as to what are the motivations behind that.
Well, we have the agenda, but was.
Right.
Can you show what?
There's a separate handout with a chart, graphics, other information.
It would have been appropriate for the folks with the petition to share that with the board. Thank you for pointing it out to us.
Absolutely. Another one is, if this proposal should go through, currently there is a municipal manager that is co-supervised, co-hired, co-evaluated by a board of the select board and a board of the trustees. If that were to happen with this current makeup, that would mean there are 8 village residents and 3 town residents who would help to evaluate the manager, which has a lot of day-to-day purview over the municipality. So if representation is a concern, this doesn't address the representation of the supervision of our municipality, which should again be in everybody's forefront of their mind. Another point of concern being that should this pass, say in March, when does it go to the legislature? Does it go to the legislature in this session, or is it the next session? Should they decide to pick it up this session?
It would go to the legislature in this session, but it would go into their workload, and it would be up to them to pick it up.
So if this isn't prioritized, since they do have a few things going on right now with it being an election year, then if it's then put on 2021 and they receive competing interests or competing charter changes, that could put this in a very difficult situation of what do they do, and do they again do what had been done, I believe it was 20 or so years ago, of Essex, you figured this out, and we're right back where we started again by them taking no action.
Let me clarify that a little. So it would go to the legislature this session, it would go into their regular workload, and it would be up to the committee chairs to pick it up or not. If it's not picked up in this year, it's the end of a biennium. I'm not sure what that means for a bill that doesn't get picked up, whether we have to start over again. Presuming that November 3rd happens and the merger vote passes, then that would also go to the legislature. So yes, there is the possibility that there would be 2 competing representation plans. The 1999 merger situation, the village voted to separate. The town voted to merge. They were competing proposals intentionally. Not sure why that happened. I didn't live here in 1999, but that is what happened. The legislature sent them back because the legislature could not choose between separating and merging. So that was not the legislature's fault. That was our fault. We need to get it right this time.
And then for those who are looking to, who have made great suggestions as to how to improve this charter change, we don't have that purview, if I understand it correct, because what was provided by the petition is what must be put forth to the voters. So regardless of what we all ask for tonight, we can't change what's being proposed for the next ballot, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And in full disclosure, Andrew is the president of the village trustees.
I'm just going to clarify as a state representative, and I only spoke for 10 seconds.
Excuse me, Betsy. No, please have a seat. I did tell everyone that they need to speak, everyone gets to speak once, and if you'd like to speak twice, we need to let everyone else have a turn.
I'm going to clarify one statement we made.
Betsy, I've asked you to sit. Thank you. Who would like to speak next? There's rules. Jeff.
I'm just going to clarify the question. My goodness.
Shh.
We good?
Yes, please speak, Jeff.
Jeff Benjamin. I'd like to expand town outside the village, but I'd like to say 8-3, because I think that's an important thing to discuss. Because right now, I think one of the things that's falling through with this proposal is 3 in the village and 3 outside the village. But 8-3 and 8-1 outside the village are 2 very different areas. So if we're having representation and all the outside the village are from 8-1 on Susie Wilson Road, how is that helping me in 8-3 rural any different than all the representation coming from 8-2 village? I think there is a distinction of all three of these districts that we have in Essex, but I do feel that it is causing a lot of division with the village and outside the village, and that needs to go away. I think that we are all Essex, and we all should be Essex, and we all have the needs of Essex as a community. And it shouldn't be village, town outside the village, 8-1, 8-2, 8-3. You know, let's just do away with all that and just be Essex. And I think that's where we just need to get to. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? John.
Good evening, everybody. My name's John Lang. I want to start by saying forever I have been a very strong supporter of merge. I always thought it made sense, consolidation, less people, a better budget number for all what we have to deal with, all the people of the town, highway, and so forth. But now the talk is that the town outside of village is going to have a substantial tax increase as a result of this, because obviously we're a very large landowner. That's pretty hard for me to swallow. I'm in a position now, I think I'm overly taxed very severely. And you'd all be shocked if you knew what our property generated a year in property taxes. In light of the current way this whole thing's going now, I don't really support merger anymore. It just seems to have turned into this contentious article of who's going to pay more, who's going to save money, who's going to gain, who's going to lose. And as always, people tend to vote with their pocketbooks. They do not vote with what is generally good for the community. I would love to be a supporter of merge, but it's got to be in a situation where the town at Essex residents are not feeling hurt by this extra tax that they will have to assume. I agree with the other gentleman. I have always felt Essex is Essex, where kids all go to the same school. We are still Essex people. Why is it so divisive? But it just seems when you have a lot of different voices, all of a sudden that divisiveness comes into the picture again, and it does very strongly, and people think with their wallets. I would like to be in a position of supporting this merger, but when I have to look at a tax increase, probably of $5,000 or $6,000 a year, and that's a small percentage, these are numbers that are floating around the community, I can't support it. Anytime you see consolidation, there should be reduction of costs. And there should be enough reduction of costs to not have a tax increase. So that said, I wish you all luck, and I appreciate y'all doing your time. But I've been going to these meetings for a long time. Things have really changed over the years. It used to be all people from the town. We are all concerned about the town. People from the village were concerned about things in the village. Now it seems to be all, whew, it's weird, and I don't find it as effective as it used to be. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thanks, John, and I hope you'll stay tuned as we work on the taxation plan, because we are trying to address that issue. So. Next.
Ed Wilbur, Browns River Road. Just wanted to thank you all for the work that you have put in, but I often keep getting the same feeling I got during the gun ordinance issue, the same feeling I get during the merger votes that have been put down time and time again. I just feel like there's this constant sales pitch. The merger, I went to the meeting, and it was a sales pitch of, do you want this merger, or this merger, or this merger? And there seemed to be no voice of what about not merging as one of the options. There was a marketing firm that was hired, and it felt like a marketing job. There was no representation from the other side. The other thing I would like to point out is I have felt very underrepresented where I live. I'm in a very rural part of Essex, just before the Westford town line. And I really feel like where I am out there, I've had conversations with people in the village, and very few of them know that I have my own septic system. It went bad 15 years ago, $10,000. No one from the village helped redo my septic system. During the last storm, several $1,000s worth of road repairs to my driveway, almost a half mile long. Nobody from the village puts money into that. So I get a little frustrated when I hear that I'm not paying my fair share of taxes. We have the worst internet. There's third world countries that have better internet than what I can get where I am in Essex. So I just feel like there's got to be a better way to represent people that live in rural areas like I do. You know, again, I've had these conversations where people just don't realize if my well goes bad, no one from the village is going to help out with my well. Nobody plows my driveway. That responsibility and cost comes to me. You all, if you're in the village, have sidewalks. You have natural gas. I don't have that available to me. So when it comes to paying our fair share in taxes, I just like people to keep an open mind and think about what are the costs associated with living in a rural environment versus living in a very suburban neighborhood where lots of people do live in Essex. And I do want this to feel like a single Essex community. I think it's very important. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Next. Ken?
Ken Signorello from Brigham Hill Road, and I'm one of the individuals who got this petition together. I want to tell you why we got this petition together. It's a question that hasn't really been asked, and it's very important because I just heard the survey mentioned from KSV, the marketing company that was hired. That's in fact what started it. One of the clearest signals we saw on that survey was the preferred model amongst the 844 individuals who took this survey, not necessarily town residents, but a signal, preferred district-only voting. The least preferred option was a combination, least preferred. In the middle was at large. I thought maybe this might be something to look at. We called the Secretary of State. Believe it or not, the petition wording that we actually put together was, we got assistance from the Secretary of State. Surprise, surprise. 9 out of 10 doors we knocked on said 2 things to us. 2, that seems fair, and that makes sense. Simple. And that encouraged us to continue on. And it didn't take very long to get 1,000 signatures. We walked it around, and on March the 3rd, you'll have the final say. I want to say one other thing about representation. Our select board members work very hard, there's no question about it, many hours. They are elected at large, they all say they represent the entire town. I believe that they try to. But it doesn't matter who they think they represent, it matters what you think. Do you think they represent you? That's what really counts, not what they believe. And you decide that by actions, of course. And you decide how to handle it at the ballot. 3 and 3 is simple. Irene will talk about some of the issues that were brought up. There aren't that many, actually. I encourage you to give it a try. We have not had great luck with an odd number. Maybe 3 is the secret and the magic sauce. Thank you.
Next.
Mary Lou Hurley, Town Outside the Village. You were talking earlier about precedent and that there is no precedent for this. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about the legislature not having done that before either. If you don't try something new, you will never get change. I really believe when all of you say that you take us all into account when you make decisions, that you believe that. But I also feel that I am not always represented as a person from outside the village. And I don't feel that when I've spoken about it that I've been heard. I feel like the merger has been pushed down our throats. I feel like maybe this is a better way, and I think it's fair. And I think when you have 3 and 3, they will come to an agreement. You don't have to have an odd number to come to an agreement. And I think just having that negative attitude about it is coloring something that doesn't have to be that way. when you know you have to make a decision, someone will move, someone else will move, you'll come to a decision. Thank you.
Next. Daryl.
Daryl Stoltz. I live in the town and the village. Tonight when I came through the door, I found a graphic produced by Ken Signorello. It appeared to show at least a decade of the balance between the village and the town outside the village on the select board. And all of those years favored the town. And for at least a decade or so, Irene Renner was on the select board during the time when the balance favored the town outside the village. And no time that I recall during that decade did Irene Renner express any concern for the village being underrepresented. And she never proposed a sixth member to represent the village to make everything even. I just think that's part of the motivation here that everyone should think about. During her tenure on the select board, to follow up on Mr. Plegman's comments, I never felt that anybody on the select board except Irene Renner was not representing my interests.
Daryl, I
Thank you.
have to stop you there. Thank you. Let's try to be respectful of everyone in the audience and of our former and current select board members, please. Irene.
Irene Renner, I happen to live outside the village. Thank you, Daryl, for the introduction. I wasn't sure where to begin. There are just so many things to say. I started my volunteering in local government over 14 years ago. I was appointed to a merger task force in 2005. I quickly realized that we had some problems with representation. I researched the most mathematically perfect solution called proportional representation. It has to do with ranked voting, and people who are much longer in the tooth than I told me it was too complex. It could not be included in the merger plan for that year. I kept looking for other ways that we could change representation, and I called Fair Vote, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and I commissioned them to write a report called The Missing Half. This is before I got on the select board. I commissioned a report on the village's behalf, even though I have never lived in the village. It is here. You may find copies of it online to this day. You may also find links to it from my personal website, irenerenner.com. I sat at the village annual meeting and I handed out these reports called The Missing Half. I printed up banners at my own expense that promoted fair representation as the solution to merger, that promoted proportional representation. Fast forward 14 years and I'm still looking for ways to bring this community together. I sit at meetings night after night, week after week, and I see that of the people designing a new merger plan, 8 out of 10 of them live in the village. And for more than a year now, members of the public have asked for equal representation at that merger table and have been denied. If you cannot find it in your hearts to even up who's at the table talking about merger, then it was up to the residents to bring an issue like this onto a ballot and ensure that going forward, we have equal teams at the table. Otherwise, when I watch a meeting, it's like watching a hockey game in which one team has a power play over and over for the entire game. And then it's the same way at the next game, and on it goes. And the town outside the village, once again, has no voice and no representation. Thank you.
Next. Next. Sir?
I'm Paul Austin, and I'm in the town. One very quick comment. One very quick comment. I think 3-3 is the best. If it's so contentious, then whatever article is discussed probably shouldn't go forward. I think with 3-3 and one outlier, then you almost know if that outlier is in one community or the other, it's going to feel upset. Now, what I really want to talk about, and I really don't have enough time, and I am lacking a little bit in information. I think this whole charter thing was framed incorrectly. The idea is the people in the village are paying more than the town, and that should be equalized. I would suggest everyone is paying their fair share. I don't think everyone in this room or even on the board understands what the village charter means. The village charter was created, as it was in so many towns on riverbanks with mills, to permit them to buy things that they normally couldn't afford at a town level. So the village people collect taxes from businesses that are not shared with the town. I can't speak to the percentage, I can't speak to how it's done, but unless corrected, the village collects money on things that they can spend it on. Now, back in the 69, 70, and 80, when I first moved here, my house in the town is $1,000 more in taxes than in the village. The village were conservative, they spent judiciously, and they ran for a long time very well. It would appear to me that the spending got out of control, and I don't know what the bonds are that the village had to write. I don't know what the bonds are or the financial commitments they may have put the village to.
30
but
seconds, sir. 30 seconds left.
What's that?
You have 30 seconds left.
Oh, thank you.
Now 30 seconds left.
So I think, and 25 now, I really think to solve the problem, there needs to be a clear airing and understanding of the finances of the village and the town. That's only fair. I don't want someone paying more taxes than me, and if that's not equitable. But I don't want to be paying somebody else's taxes either. If the village wants a 70-foot water slide, why should I pay for it? But that's what's going to happen if you merge, and we've got 80% of the people on the board. That's it.
Thanks for your time. Next? You're good. Thank you. So we had 15 people raise their hands earlier, and we're up to 20 now. So I'm going to, Kim, I saw you raise your hand. Was there anyone else who has not spoken? Oh, I thought you were doing that.
Can I raise it now?
Sure. I thought you were, so.
Kim Gleason, I live in the town outside of the village. I'm coming to this conversation a little bit late, and I am really appreciative of the fact-finding that I'm hearing that the Select Board has done. I find that the material that I received when I came in has the marketing appeal perhaps, but the lack of clarity and facts that I think were raised regarding representation to be critically important. It sounds as though we would not be finding equilibrium and representation if the merger should not happen. It would, as I think had been discussed, have a manager being overseen by 3 versus 8. Just a simple example, I think, of that problem. And I think deciding that we're going to take this type of a petition to the legislature to make an unprecedented decision as we as a community are about to embark on a broader, more strategic decision about our future is very short-sighted. In addition to all the very important concerns raised and research done to try and find out what you could about it. So thank you for doing that. I would say on the broader issues of unification, we are the 2nd largest community in the state, and we fail to optimize our potential by spending our energy in divisive ways separately from one another. I invite us to consider how we can be all of Essex and optimize our potential together. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, Now, I think we've had a lot of people speak, more than initially said they would. And I do want to honor Betsy's request to clarify something that she asked to clarify. So Betsy, if you'd like to make your statement, and then we're going to close the public hearing.
To Andrew and to the rest of us, when the government ops receives the request for a charter change, they review it. It gets to their table, and if they don't take it up this session, it goes away. It doesn't get pulled back. It doesn't get relooked at next year right away. It would have to be presented again to them. So it's a moot point if it doesn't get worked on. And if we do a full charter change the next year, then that would take precedence over this. It would null and void that if this went through. So you wouldn't have to worry about that at all. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Betsy. Okay, so next Monday, same time, same place, we will be meeting again for a hearing on this very petition. You're welcome to join us. So I will accept a motion from the Select Board to close the public hearing portion of the meeting.
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Just skip this.
So I neglected to skip, I skipped over a portion of the agenda, the public to be heard for items that are not on the agenda. Did anybody want to speak about anything that was not on tonight's agenda? My apologies for getting it out of order. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute recess while folks put on their coats and head home. Who wrote on my agenda? Where's my agenda?
Hey, that was awfully kind of you.
So he doesn't have to pay that much.
Very excited about
We're kind of thinking that to have That's cool. We're subsidized by the village.
We're not going to be able to get all 10 members, you know.
Thank you for coming out.
Can we talk tomorrow evening?
Yeah. I love this public.
Things against, I gave you a clean one. Hello there, Liz. Thanks for what you do on the school board.
Where are you going to? You're not at the meeting tomorrow? You are? I thought you were not.
Oh, to the Board of Selectmen, I can't go to the, I can't go to the meeting today.
Okay, but you'll be at the.
But I'll be at the Wednesday to I was like, can you come tonight?
All right. See you then.
It was delightful to talk with her.
Yeah, I feel well represented in 8th grade. That's what I'm going to say at the next meeting. I feel really well represented.
Well, February 3rd.
Out there on the Jericho town.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate you doing it. For your service.
Continue with the rest of the agenda. Here. Well, I did it. I'll do it again.
You all right?
No, it's okay. You're fine.
Are you all right?
Pardon me?
Is he okay? I'm saying.
Yeah. I'll repeat myself.
Ron?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Scott. I'll repeat myself from before we did the recess. If there's anyone who has anything to say about the agenda or about anything that's not on the agenda, my apologies for not bringing that up prior to the hearing. Just want to make sure we got that formality out of the way. Okay. Oh, Irene.
Can you talk about the lawsuit? What lawsuit you'll be talking about after executive session? Can you at least be general in which one it's?
No, we cannot. Ongoing litigation is not something we can comment on.
I was told the lawsuit was resolved. Thank you.
We are still in an appeal period, and until that ends, we cannot talk about it. Okay, business item 6A, workshop on the FY 2021-2025 capital budget and plan. And the amazing and talented Dennis Lutz is here to guide us and answer our questions.
Thank you much. I don't feel too amazing tonight. I've got a head cold, so I'm going to try to talk through it if I can. So I guess the question really at this particular point is you've had the document for some time now. I know Andy had some questions, and I know Sarah responded to some of those today, but I think it's more a question of what questions do you have on the plan, and we'll try to answer them as we go along. I think we are in a tight time frame as far as warning it. I think the big issue, and not the big issue, but the substantive issue, I guess, for the warning is the dollar values that we talked about in terms of what is coming from the 2 cents on the grand list, and we're approximating that to be $537,000. Our estimated spend for FY21 is $2,461,274, and after that, the balance of the accounts would be $3,301,325, and that's the basis for the warning if you approve it tonight and we go to the February 3rd public hearing. This is a workshop, public hearing to have it adopted.
Well, the February 3rd agenda is going to be packed.
I think this was planned, if I'm not mistaken, to come in 10 minutes before the hour to try to get it completed and done and finished. So, but anyway, questions?
Andy, I know you had quite a few questions. Why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so the one question I raised was that the Essex Way to Forestdale path, and you've talked about it a couple of times, Dennis, and the question is whether the select board would want to take those funds and make them generally available in the path fund rather than leaving them sit there. I understand that the account could remain open in case it gets readdressed at some point, but rather than sit on money, I think I'd like the select board to consider making it more available.
When Sarah and I talked early, and we started to put the plan together, we do have a lot of accounts, and I think it's important to look at those accounts in the sense of, are they really active or not active? And there's certain projects that probably need to remain on the list even if there's no funds for them, because there still are a need. I can think of, for example, the sewers over in Paynesville, which is a long-term need of the community. We aren't funding it. Right now, we don't have a way to fund it, but it's a viable need of the community. It probably belongs on the list as a capital project. Then there's others, and this is one that, like Andy mentioned, on the Forestdale to Pinewood. If we were to do anything there, it's probably at this particular point in time, back when we looked, it was $1 million project. Probably it's more than that now. To basically put if you think of the northern connector in Burlington with the bike crossings across the roadway, that's what you'd have to envision along the Cirque Highway. And there's only a couple places it could go on high ground, and you've got to build paths to get there. So it's a major, major project. And we've had money sitting in the path account for many years that's really set there for that project. It was earmarked by the select board many years ago, but it's not being used for that. It's not being used for really anything. And our thought was that should probably go into the general path account. It doesn't change the bottom line, as Andy said, on the budget, but it should probably go into the general path account and be used there if we need it for projects that are short-term, because it's really not going to get us anywhere towards that longer-term project. but that's a select board decision. You can approve the capital plan and not make that decision tonight. There may be, when Sarah and I talked today, there may be other projects along the same line. I would recommend you do it, but if you don't, that's fine. It's not going to affect anything. We can come back at a later date and look at some of those other items and say, do they really belong in the capital plan? Should we remove them?
No, I'm on the other side. Back to what Dennis was just saying, and Andy, I can't see you, it's kind of this way. I think the plan is the plan, and any of the movements, we can kind of sort of address it like we do the surplus funds. We can do it at a later meeting, get budget over, get a few things done, then have Sarah, Dennis do a presentation when we have all of it laid out. And if things get moved, doesn't change the amount of money, it just moves where it's going to be designated to in a future year, then everybody can get up to speed.
And it's more about fund balances in the various accounts than it really is allocating funds. The real issue to me is allocation of the new 2 cents and what we're spending of this year out of funds that we maybe previously allocated and now have a project to go with it. That's the most critical issue, and that's really what the plan says. But it's up to the board to decide how you want to proceed with that.
And this is a total of funds of $10,000 we're talking about, right? Okay. Do you want to talk about this now, or do you want to?
Do I want to talk about it?
Everyone, the royal we.
Well, I
Max.
think it makes sense what Andy's proposing. If that money's not going to, if that thing's never really going to come to fruition in our lifetime, say, we have immediate needs here that really need to be addressed, and I would be fine to be able to move that to the bucket that then allows you to use it on projects that are more near-term, more appropriate.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Do you need, so it's already been taken care of in this budget that you've presented to us, and so.
Sarah did not include it in the changes.
Okay.
So it is one of those things that would probably, I don't realize, I don't know if you want to do it just on an agreement or whether you want a motion to actually move it, but it would be a movement within the financing department to move the account around as opposed to a movement in the plan, because it isn't, you won't find that $10,000 anywhere in the plan.
And it's not going to change the amount
It's
on the
not
warning?
going to change any of the amounts.
Right, okay. It's up to all of you if you prefer to just ask Dennis to do that now, or we can have a presentation of more information at a later date. It seems that it's a small amount of money and a pretty simple solution. I'm okay with just authorizing Dennis to make that move. Okay. Do you feel comfortable doing a vote on that, or do you think we just give a consensus?
Well, do we need to, what are we doing tonight? We're warning tonight, right? This is a workshop, so there's no recommended.
There's no recommended motion, that's correct. But we do have a business item to approve the warning on the public hearing, so we will want to finalize the dollar amount tonight.
Right, so we're not changing the dollar amount, we're
Right.
just changing where it's allocated.
Right.
Correct.
Which, procedurally, I guess, I don't really care how we do it.
Okay. I would are you satisfied with the consensus of the board on this? Yeah, I think that's sufficient,
Okay.
considering it's under $50,000 and.
I know Sarah was in agreement with that also. I mean, she can't speak for herself, but I will because we talked today.
Okay. Okay.
She's going to watch this online, Dennis. so-
She could be
I know, I'm
watching
gonna be in
live right
trouble.
now.
I'll get a phone call tomorrow morning.
And the other thing that I wanted to bring up is there's a line item, it's on the bottom of page 5 of 6 of the extended pages we have here, and it actually, and I got an explanation from Sarah earlier today, but the project name was cut off, so it wasn't clear. And reading the description, it says that it's surplus money from the 2-cent capital tax goes into this account, and I wasn't sure what that really meant. And I think Sarah explained to me that it is related to the fact that if the grand list is higher than we expect, we collect more money than we have in our capital plan, and that's the account that it goes into, and then we reallocate it at a later date to projects that need it. And so is that the right explanation?
Yes, and it may be we go into a project where the project is a $100,000 project, and it costs us $96,000. So at some point in time, there's $4,000 that were allocated towards a project, which has still been budgeted, been paid, the funds have been set aside, real funds. So the question then, where do those extra dollars go if we underspend on a project and they go to that undesignated reserve? That's another way to bring in funds to that, so that when things like the library repairs come up or the town structural garage repairs come up, there are some funds in the undesignated capital that can be put to those uses for situations that just happen.
And because there's the title of the title of the project was cut off, I didn't understand what that money was for, and I wanted, and it seemed to me that it was just sitting out there as 55,000 and change. And so I'm satisfied with the explanation. I'm not asking for anything to be changed, and I'm clear with that. And the other questions I had, I think Sarah already addressed, was the capital for the park asset was missing, and that's been added back in. And I also had a question about whether there was some double counting of software. Some of it was in the capital plan, some of it was in the operating budget. I've got that clarified too. So all my questions have been addressed.
Excellent.
So, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions on the capital plan for Dennis?
I have a small one. It's what I brought up last time, Dennis. It's just about when the community figures out, whether merger or not. It'd be nice to be able to get money into this plan, of whatever amount. Hopefully it's not much, but to replace the sign at whatever the municipal building.
I think we're going to have to collectively, as we go forward, and I mentioned that in the first session we had. My very real concern is that, and I won't speak for other people, but some other people that think of the same mind, that we're probably not putting enough money away for buildings, repairs, and maintenance. We have a fair amount of money sunk into our buildings, and when I say buildings, I mean collectively town and village, and that we need to take a much harder look at not just what's immediate. A toilet gets plugged, or sewer line backs up, but what are the longer term costs associated with a building? If in fact a roof has to be replaced in 20 years, we need to at least identify that. That doesn't mean that we necessarily have to put away money for it now, but we need to look at those assets and say, what are those things that really need to have funds set aside so that we're not having to go out and essentially borrow or do a bond for replacing buildings. And we've got a lot of old buildings that need a repair. And we have buildings where, from the building study, that are going to have to at some point be changed. And you know what they are. We don't have the kind of dollars we need to go out and do that today, but we need to think about how we're going to do that. The other one is the stormwater issue. I'm real concerned about that. I think with the direction the state is heading, we're going to find less assistance in the future to the MS4 communities and more assistance to those areas of stormwater that are not covered by a local tax. Things like preserving waterways and agricultural contributions. And so I think you're going to see some of the state's collected stormwater fees going more towards that, and Jim and I are following that, more towards that use than in direct grants to MS4 communities. The net result is we're still going to have to do our piece. We've been very lucky getting grants. We may not get those grants down the road. And then the last one is one that is the road issue. I think we're doing very well. I think we've been getting grants. We've been able to fix our roads. And I think if you look overall, it was surprised me when we did the PCI look and looked at the road conditions. And they're about the same in the village and the town in terms of average PCI rating, condition index for the roads. But there's still roads out there when you drive them. I was coming home tonight, for example, on Susie Wilson bypass. We had that and it's a paved road. It's got an excellent base that was built. I think it's got like 8 inches of asphalt. Just coming home tonight, this winter, has pretty much beat the heck out of that roadway. It's nowhere on our plan to repave. We want to go in for a Class 2 grant. So do we put it into Old Stage Road, which really needs it? Or we put that money into Susie Wilson Bypass, which has 30,000 cars a day, 25,000? I mean, those are issues we have to face. And it may be that we've got to stop doing some of our side roads, which I don't want to do either, to get those fixed. So I'm not pleading for dollars. All I'm saying is these are all things that whether we merge or don't merge, we're going to have to look at collectively in those three areas. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll keep quiet. I know Annie was concerned about the library at one of the last meetings. We are proceeding ahead with the repairs at the library. We're going to go ahead with fixing the downstairs area now. That's going to be worked on shortly. We are going to try to look at the overhang on the back to protect people going down through the handicapped area, and then the gutters. So those are going to go as part of our plan.
Thank you so much. The idea of the senior standing out under the overhang was, thank you so much.
Yeah. So those
I know
are
your plate is full.
those are going.
Thank you, Dennis. Any further questions or comments on the capital plan? Annie?
Thank you again, I'm really excited.
Evan, do you have anything to add?
No, well, other than I echoed Dennis's warning of what needs to be thought of in the future.
Okay. Okay, so if you don't have any further questions, we can move on to.
I really want to say thank you again. Okay, sorry. I'm really excited about it. I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
We can move on to approving the warning for the hearing for next week, which is item 6B. We have not made any changes to the total dollar amount of the capital budget. So if anyone would like to make a motion to approve the public hearing notice.
Question, it says 6:50, is that correct? 6:50 PM? Are we going to do the 10 minutes early? That was suggested.
That, yeah, and Dennis did mention that. So assuming that the public hearing, our public hearing starts at 7 next week. So that would mean that we'd have to all be here by like 6:45 if we can make it.
Here,
A quorum of us needs to be here by
Because I
6:45.
sprinted and I only made it at 6:59.
So
It's a long night that night.
as long as everyone is able to get here, or a quorum of us is able to get here by 6:45, then 6:50 would be the time we'd start that.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay. Okay. So I'll take a motion to approve the.
I move that the Select Board warn a public hearing for February 3rd, 2020 at 6:50 PM for the purpose of soliciting comments on the FY 2020 capital budget and 5-year plan.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Dennis. Thanks again, as always.
Thank you.
So our next item of business is an executive session, so we're going to set that aside until we complete the rest of the agenda, and then we'll return to that. We have a consent agenda. Would anybody like to move it so we can discuss it?
I move approval of the consent agenda with Select Board comments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. And the reading file, does any Select Board members have comments, questions, or things to share? Andy?
One thing, I had signed up to hand out informational materials on February 24th. Turns out I'm going to be in Florida,
Oh, okay.
so I'll have to miss that. I've got 2 others that I've scheduled for the 14th and 11th. So.
Okay. I think Tammy sent us today a link to, or she stated that the schedule is up in our folders, so.
It's blank, though.
Oh, it's blank?
It's not.
And it's not editable.
It's not editable either.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah.
We'll make a note, we'll update it. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, it'd be great if she could update that with
Yeah.
all the input we got last meeting.
Okay.
Along that same line, there's a Select Board meeting on the 25th.
That first one on the list?
Of February. There's a Select Board meeting on the 25th of February. That's also vacation week, school vacation week. I'll be in Florida that day too.
Okay. Good to know. Is anybody else going to be out of town on the 25th?
But I'm thinking about going to Florida.
I didn't sign up for it.
Okay, good to know. Any other, oh, Annie.
I just want to say again about the gather at the table, how excited I am. Almost as excited about the library, but to sit here and remember that there were up to 500 meals served.
In this room.
And I was at work and I came in at 6:45 and it was still, the gym was still packed. It was just a beautiful thing.
It was a great event.
It was great.
Thanks for all you did to help bring it together.
Yeah, I'm going to say the names of the people who truly worked. Bridget Meyer, Cindy Delman, Erin Knox, Lori Houghton, Liz Subin, Scott Fay, and 40 enthusiastic volunteers. I did some website and some other stuff, but seriously, those people busted tail. It was amazing.
It was a great night.
Mhm.
Thanks. Pat, did you have something? Did I see your hand?
It was just a thought about the outreach schedule. One event that I noticed that we may want to consider attending, and I have to look at the specific dates. ADL is having its 50th annual basketball tournament, which brings a lot of the local citizens in. Right in that time frame. I think it's February, maybe like 15th, 16th, something like that. So I should be able to make that, so I wouldn't mind covering at least one of those weekend dates if we want to add that to the schedule. I thought I'd run it past everyone to see if there's an idea.
We'll add it to the schedule, and then we'll update it and send it around to everybody. Make sure we're all covering all the bases. And Evan pointed out, this is the new menu for town meeting. Thank you, Gather at the Table, for test driving. We're going to have
Bridget
chicken,
Meyer.
mac and cheese, corn, coleslaw, garlic bread, and multigrain bread. I'm so excited about the new menu.
Bridget Meyer, I should say.
Wonderful.
Championed the menu, and Scott Fay.
So it will be very nice to have
It's really exciting.
a yummy,
We should
different
probably-
meal.
Sorry to talk over you.
Oh, go ahead.
We should probably really let people know a lot. Yeah, it's exciting.
It'll be in the outreach package.
Yeah, but I mean, makes me
Okay.
want to go run it around more.
If there aren't any further comments on the reading file, we can, Andy?
I move that the Select Board make the specific finding that general public knowledge of pending probable civil litigation to which the public body is or may be a party would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Second?
All those, any discussion? All those in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Yeah, there should be one more motion. Andy?
I move that the Select Board enter into executive session to discuss pending or probable civil litigation to which the public body is or may be party pursuant to 1 VSA 313A 1E to include the unified manager.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. We are going to recess briefly while we figure out where we're going for executive session. Annie?
I would like to say one thing is that when Andy started to make the motion, I was delighted that Andy was that prepared, but my look of happiness was nothing to do with the fact that we're going into executive session for a very serious matter.
Appreciate
I just want to be clear.
Thank you. So Scott's going to clean up.
Normally, we've been going
We go into the